It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
On this edition of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast, we have another interesting week of the NFL to break down and recap for you all, along with Fantasy Football Files, as always, with Jason Kamlowski, plus some postseason baseball news from the World Series champion Washington Nationals. All that and so much more. Stay tuned.
I'm glad you connected. This is Dave Johnson, voice of the Washington Wizards. You have connected to the right place because you are listening to my man, Josh Kirby, on Sports Podcast.
Alrighty, another edition of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast. Yes, indeed, episode 60. 60 episodes strong. Thank you so much for everybody who has supported me along the way. Greatly appreciate the support as always. Before we get into it, we're part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network. We're sponsored by Red 11 Chips and PM Plus Reserves. Thanks as always to MPT Now Productions, Dave Johnson, and JR Beats Official as always. Very interesting week to get into the NFL as always. Fun stat for you. Number one, every team at home on Sunday won. So home field advantage played a key. It might have been something else, but I think it was home field advantage. Every single team who was a home team, that's including Houston beating Jacksonville because that game was in London. Every single team at home won, which is very cool to see because it's like, it's home field advantage, basically. That's what home field advantage basically means. And we have another interesting fact for you. The first time in NFL history with three quarterbacks from three different teams with the same last name won a game. Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, Kyle Allen, the Carolina Panthers, and Brandon Allen coming in for the injured Joe Flacco, who is now on IR for the Broncos. All got victories. So three quarterbacks with the same last name, the name of Allen, gets a victory on Sunday. So very interesting to see that. And another key stat, piece of news before we get into this recap. Cam Newton has been placed on IR, and Kyle Allen will be taking over the duties as starting quarterback for the rest of the season for the Carolina Panthers. Could this be Cam Newton's last game as a Carolina Panther? The question marks there. I have a feeling it might, but we're going to have to see down the road. But let's get into it. Week 9, starting Thursday night, San Francisco squeaked one by against Arizona. Arizona played really well. Kyler Murray had 2 touchdowns on the day. Kenyon Drake, new acquisition from the Dolphins, had 110 rushing yards and a touchdown. So really big acquisition for the Cardinals on the running game there. 49ers still undefeated and the lone undefeated team after week 9. Buffalo over Washington 24-9. Houston over Jacksonville 26-3. Nick Foles is healthy, and head coach Doug Marrone for the Jaguars said that Gardner Minshew will be sat on the bench, and Nick Foles will resume starting duties for the Jaguars next week. Carolina at home taking care of business against Tennessee. And the Kansas City Chiefs, this is a game I really want to get into. With Patrick Mahomes not being there, Matt Moore, 25 for 35, 275 yards and a touchdown. And wow, at home, and they beat Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins had 220 yards and 3 touchdowns, but the rushing game was just not there. The rush game was the key factor in the Chiefs winning this game. It was a back-and-forth game all in, all around, but the Chiefs played really physical, really tough, came down to a game-winning field goal from Harrison Butker to beat the Minnesota Vikings. And Patrick Mahomes, you could tell he was pretty happy after that, even though he was not playing at all. But Patrick Mahomes, I expect him to be back in the starting role next week or the week after. Next on tap, we have the Dolphins getting their first win of the season over the New York Jets. The Jets just do not look good at all. And Sam Darnold played great. Sam Darnold played all right. He had a touchdown and an interception, but Ryan Fitzpatrick went out and threw 3 touchdowns. And the running game was just not there. It was just 2 bad teams playing it close, in my opinion. So, and the Philadelphia Eagles beating the struggling Chicago Bears 22-14 in that game. Mitch Trubisky, I don't know. He's just not looking good. The Bears' running game is not looking good. Nothing about the Bears is looking good. And I watched some of that game, and I was like, wow, what are the Bears doing? I mean, they only had 55 rushing yards on the ground. And like at halftime, I think they had like 2 yards total. So I'm sort of confused. The Bears look great, but they dropped down to 3-5 after that loss. So it's sort of interesting to see how they can turn it around. Mitch Trubisky will still be the starter. Reporters were asking head coach Matt Nagy about Trubisky as starter, and he likes Trubisky. And I agree. You need to keep Trubisky in to give him more learning experience. Because it's one of those things, you're going to have a quarterback controversy if you decide, oh, yeah, I want to throw in another quarterback to see if we can win more games. But, yeah, Trubisky is the starter there in Chicago, and I totally agree. He needs to get that experience. Next on the list, what a very close game this was. The Indianapolis Colts in a close game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Jacoby Brissett went out with a knee injury, so Brian Hoyer came in and finished off the game. And on a side note, I just feel like we're talking about quarterbacks all season. There are so many different quarterbacks getting injured or replaced. It's just crazy the amount of quarterbacks I've talked about over the course of this season on the podcast. But getting back to what I was saying, Brian Hoyer had 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, replacing Jacoby Brissett. The Colts pretty much had this game handled, but Adam Vinatieri came in and missed a chip shot. If you saw that field goal on TV, Adam Vinatieri, it was sort of like my drive off of T-box number 1. He kicks it and he shanks it left. Like, it's nowhere near being good. And I was like, wow. But Adam Vinatieri, I think it's time for you to retire. I'm sorry. He's a legend at the kicking spot, but he needs to retire. Mason Rudolph, on the other hand, back in action, looking pretty good for the Steelers. But this was a game the Colts should have won, but they didn't. It was plain and simple. It came down to Adam Vinatieri. But Brian Hoyer came in, filled the job of Jacoby Brissett pretty well, in my opinion. And I just think he will do an effective job at the backup position if Jacoby Brissett cannot make it another week. Next on the list, Oakland over Detroit, 31 to 24. Close matchup in that game as well. Seattle over Tampa Bay in overtime. Another close one. A lot of close matchups in this game. But those two games, Detroit and Oakland and Tampa Bay, Seattle, there were so many plays going back and forth. And that's what good football is, going back and forth, and deciding the game in the last minute. Denver over Cleveland, 24 to 19. The NFL told Odell Beckham Jr. he could not play in the second half if he did not change his cleats. Los Angeles stuns Green Bay, drops them to 7-2. And the Sunday night game, Baltimore handing the New England Patriots their first loss of the season. Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, I was watching some of that game, and during the pregame, Baltimore just looked like they were ready to play. They were ready to face the challenge of the New England Patriots, and they won that challenge, beating them 37-20. Tom Brady had an interception in that game, and James White only had 38 yards, which is not common for this Patriots team. Ingram had 115 yards on the ground for Baltimore, but it was very uncommon to see New England lose, especially to the Ravens, since Lamar Jackson is still pretty young. But I'm impressed. The Ravens are a playoff team, in my opinion. If they can keep up how they're going and Lamar Jackson can stay healthy, then the Ravens are going to be a playoff team. No doubt about it. So, and the Monday night game, an NFC East division matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants. Dallas handed New York a loss pretty easily, 37-18. Bye weeks for Week 9, the Bengals, Falcons, Rams, and Saints. And one more topic I want to get into is the Washington Redskins. Case Keenum on the concussion protocol once again. So Dwayne Haskins gets his first start, and he managed for a starting quarterback, but this is 3 straight games that the Washington Redskins have not scored a touchdown. The Bills beat them 24-9. 3 field goals for the Washington Redskins. That's unacceptable. And they get a bye week this week. Will they fix it? Probably not. But if they do, I will be surprised. But it's just madness over there in Washington. And I don't even want to get into the new Trent Williams stuff, like saying the Redskins, he was mad at the Redskins for not detecting that he had cancer. Apparently he had a tumor or something. So much drama in Washington, and it goes to show for their 1-8 record. But Dwayne Haskins, nothing spectacular, 15 for 22, 144 yards in his first career start as a Washington Redskin. So that about wraps up our Week 9 in the NFL. A lot of close games, a lot of fun to watch, and it was just a great time. So that's it. Once again, San Francisco over Arizona, 28-25. Buffalo over Washington, 24-9. Houston over Jacksonville, 26-3. Carolina over Tennessee, 30-20. Kansas City over Minnesota, 26-23. Miami over the Jets, 26-18. Philadelphia over Chicago, 22-14. Pittsburgh over Indianapolis, 26-24. Oakland over Detroit, 31-24. Seattle over Tampa Bay in overtime, 40-34. Denver over Cleveland, 24-19. Los Angeles over Green Bay, 26-11. Baltimore over New England, 37-20. and Dallas over the Giants 37-18. Coming up next, we have Fantasy Football Files with Jason Kamlowski. When I return, I will be covering some postseason news from the World Series champion Washington Nationals, and we will give you a preview into week number 10 in the National Football League. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast.
All right, welcome to Week 9 recap on Fantasy Football Files with your host, Jason Kamlowski. You can find me at Jason Kamlowski on Twitter. Before we get started, just want to congratulate Josh on 60 episodes. That is huge. For people that don't record podcasts or get into that sort of thing, to be able to sustain 60 podcasts is a big deal because the number of podcasts that start every day, it's in the hundreds. So when you consider there's, thousands of new podcasts that start every week, most of them, don't last past episode, 4 or 5. For Josh to be able to do this for, 60 episodes is really a big deal for him. And I think it's just a credit to the fact that he wants to give, his audience, good content, which he's done a great job of. I mean, some of the guests he's had, had Clinton Portis on, I think for his 50th episode. So that was really cool of him. And he's really doing a good job of kind of making his way and making a niche and kind of starting a brand. So, congratulations to Josh. Obviously I'm thankful for the opportunity to just be part of this every week. I've enjoyed, recapping, everything, and it kind of helps me when in my own fantasy playing to recap these things and kind of take a look at statistical analysis and where guys finished up last week and just talk about some of the games. It's helped me this year to have a pretty solid year so far. So we're gonna look to keep that going, but again, I want to say congratulations to Josh. That's an awesome accomplishment. So, week 9, lot to unpack here. I think, and for me, I'm going to start with the late game on Sunday. I think Lamar Jackson is one of the most underappreciated football players in the NFL. It's obvious for fantasy purposes, he is just a ridiculously valuable guy. I mean, he's on pace to have over 1,000 yards rushing, and he just absolutely torched the New England defense Sunday night. And I don't think that is something that was completely unexpected, although I did recommend him as maybe like a shocker sit, depending on what your other options were for Sunday, just because of how well New England had been playing on defense. But, when you look at New England's matchups heading into that game, they had not really played, quote unquote, prolific offense, maybe outside of week 1 against Pittsburgh. But even then, I don't think Ben was like completely healthy that game. But Lamar just absolutely torched them. And, there's so many good quarterbacks right now in the NFL. And for fantasy purposes, I think probably the top 4 quarterbacks right now are Russ, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Deshaun Watson. And that's an awesome thing because, honestly, they're all minority quarterbacks, which I think is so cool. That we have guys that, don't necessarily fit the like traditional drop back and, pass kind of mold. And they're just so exciting. Russell Wilson, obviously just can do some incredible things. And he's really found like this great connection with Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks offense, man, they're just rolling right now. But, you got Lamar who can do so many different things on the ground. I think one of the most underrated passers in the league. When he was at Louisville, he was a legitimately good passer, I thought. I always thought he got a bad rap with that, but Lamar Jackson is a legitimately good passer, I think. Deshaun Watson, obviously incredible arm, can do so many things, extend plays. I think he's, just easily he's easily comfortably for me in that top 4. But I think it's kind of a question of him and Lamar, kind of what you would want to do with them between 3 and 4. But I mean, you're splitting hairs between the 2 of them. And obviously Mahomes is just, just the GOAT. I mean, he's just awesome. and I just think it's a really cool thing right now to have that. And, all four of those guys are just really tearing things up. Outside of Lamar just going ham against New England on Sunday, you had Russell Wilson throwing for 5 touchdown passes, 378 yards, just absolutely torching Tampa Bay. Deshaun Watson didn't have like a big game over in London, but still threw for 240 some yards, and the biggest thing was they were able to get the win, and it was kind of an ugly win, but he's capable of making things happen. And obviously Mahomes being out kind of sucks, but it looks like he practiced in full today. So if you're a Mahomes owner, he should be back this week. But just a lot of really good quarterback play across the league, which has kind of been a theme. Even when you get Matthew Stafford throwing for 400 yards against Oakland, which is not really a surprise. Jameis went up to Tampa Bay, really showed out. We got good Jameis last Sunday going up to Tampa Bay, 335 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's just so up and down. And the fact that we had good Jameis on Sunday probably fed into the fact that Russ was able to continue to throw the ball. And, we didn't get like a bad Jameis situation that would have limited Russ to just, maybe throwing the ball like 25, 26, 27 times. Russ had 43 pass attempts. And granted, the game went to overtime. But, that's when he gets that kind of volume, you can just expect him kind of to go off. But even Ryan Tannehill, kind of getting into the mix with throwing for 331 yards. Obviously Mariota's done in Tennessee. If you do have him, cut him. I think that's just kind of a terrible situation for him there, and it's hard to say where he's going to end up next year. But, quarterback play, and it looks like this week we're going to get Nick Foles back. Cam Newton goes on the IR, which was a little bit disappointing. I actually have him in 2 dynasty leagues. Was kind of holding out hope that he'd be back, but his season's over. So, some shuffling of the quarterbacks here. I'm a little bit surprised that they're going to go away from Minshew in Jacksonville, but obviously, getting beat the way they did last week and only scoring 3 points, and obviously, Foles is the sunken cost with the money. So, it kind of makes sense, I guess, from that perspective. But quarterback, I say it every week, it's the same thing. Don't waste those high picks on quarterback unless it's a super flex or a 2 quarterback league, because you can get production from a lot of different guys there. At the running back position, Christian McCaffrey doing it again. 146 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Had the big touchdown run where I saw the play live when I was watching on Sunday, and that hole just opened, and once he gets through that first level, you're just not going to catch him. He's just a special guy, special running back. Josh Jacobs had a big week, which I don't think is overwhelmingly shocking. Detroit's run defense is terrible. Don't ask me how that happened. They're absolutely horrific against the run. Mark Ingram went for 100 yards against New England. Baltimore just really beat them up Sunday night. And I don't think that means anything in terms of where the Patriots are going to end up at the end of the year. I fully expect them to be at AFC Championship game with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. But Baltimore just absolutely took it to them. But again, that just seems like kind of one of those games like the Patriots are just going to bounce back this week and go down and just blast somebody. Adrian Peterson and Carlos Hyde, a couple of guys that are, getting up there in age, but both ran for 100 yards. I personally don't trust either one of them. Hyde, his upcoming schedule, I went on the F3 pod this week. His upcoming schedule is just brutal. Got the Ravens, got the Colts, got the Patriots, and got the Broncos coming up. So I don't know that I would be looking to necessarily buy into Carlos Hyde, but if I owned him, I'd be holding, plugging him in as a flex play. Because really, if you get anything out of Carlos Hyde, considering where he was at and what he probably cost you to pick up this year, that's everything you're getting right now is a bonus. And you've got to be pretty happy with his production so far. And the same thing with AP. Although Darius Geis did come off the IR today, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that situation there. One guy I think we need to talk about a little bit is Devin Singletary, and probably to a lesser degree what that's going to mean for Frank Gore. The last 2 weeks, Singletary's out-touched him 30 touches to 20, getting a little bit more pass game work. The 30 to 20 split is not a crazy split. It's not like it's a 75 to 25 timeshare. I mean, it's nothing like that. But the yardage for Singletary, 190 yards last 2 weeks to Gore's 49. So much more efficient with his touches. A lot more big playability. If you watched the game Sunday, which if you're a Redskins fan, you probably did. Gore got stuffed from inside the 1 yard line 3 different times. And it just that's not a good thing. And as we get down the stretch with some of these guys that are older, I mean they just wear down over the course of a season. So Devin Singletary, I think they're going to start getting him more involved. I think they realize what they have in him. Obviously invested a high 3rd round pick, so there's a lot of draft capital there. I would definitely be looking. I mean, if Singletary somehow is available, which I don't know how many leagues that's actually, a thing. But if he's actually available, you need to go out and pick him up like now. Like stop whatever you're doing and go get him. Frank Gore, I can't even advocate keeping him on the back end of your roster. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot out of him barring an injury to Singletary. But again, with some of these guys, you're happy with what you got so far because you probably didn't invest a whole lot in them. So, but at some point, you kind of churn through the backside of that roster and pick up guys that could potentially help you, maybe week 14, 15, or 16. Receiver situation, moving on, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett. I mean, not really surprised. That game environment was perfect, 40 to 34, just a shootout. Exactly what we thought we could get. I actually had a lot more Godwin than I did Evans in DFS. I thought it was a Godwin week. I was wrong. I did have Lockett, I did have DK Metcalf, I did have Russ. So I had a reasonable amount of that game. I just didn't have enough for it to do much more than break even. Tyreek Hill getting back into the swing of things, and I would say with Tyreek Hill, your buy window's slammed shut by now. But with Mahomes coming back, he is a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. I mean, if he can get done with Matt Moore, he can get done with anybody. The Lions are continuing to have to throw the ball a ton because their defense can't stop anyone. So Galladay and Marvin Jones both went over 120 yards. Both of them scored a touchdown. Jones obviously getting more catches than Galladay, which makes sense. Jones is more of a I want to say a possession guy, even though he's averaging 15 yards a catch. But, Galladay had averaged 33 yards a reception. It's just insane. Averaged 33 yards a catch, went 4 for $132. This Lions offense, they're going to have to throw. They have no running game to speak of. We talked about that last week. Ty Johnson's just washed. J.D. McKissick actually outperformed him last weekend, which really should be no surprise. I mean, Ty Johnson's he can, if you're running from like point A to point B in a straight line, he's your guy. But if there's any turn in there or anything where you've got to like change directions, I mean, he turns like a battleship. So, McKissick is, and with the game flow that they're probably going to be in, McKissick's probably going to be the more valuable back, even though I really don't want either one of them. Metcalf chipped in, going back to receivers. DK Metcalf chipped in 6 for $123 and a touchdown. I mean, he was really good on Sunday. The Seahawks did sign Josh Gordon last week, and I think that's going to be a good thing for them and for him. I don't think it's going to really cut into Lockett too much. I think if anything, it would probably cut into Metcalf's targets some, but I do think Gordon's going to have a couple blow up games. Probably not enough to be considered, legitimately fantasy relevant every week, but I do think there's going to be weeks whenever you've got the right game environment that you're going to want to have him in your lineup if you own him. I definitely wouldn't be giving up on Josh Gordon yet, especially playing with a guy like Russ. Emmanuel Sanders continues to impress, and coming off that Achilles injury, man, he's just been really good this year. I didn't think he'd be able to stay healthy or even get healthy, but he's just been really good this year. Mike Williams, hopefully at some point will find the end zone for the Chargers. Had him in daily, 3 catches, 111 yards, just kind of like Galladay, just a ridiculous yard per catch, with 37. Getting into some of the tight ends. Noah Fant had a big touchdown catch. That was good to see. Big catch and run. My guess is he's probably the third option in that offense behind Phillip Lindsay and Courtland Sutton. And I think with Fant, depending on the league and depending on the size of your league, I think Fant's a guy you've got to really consider. maybe using as like a bye week filler as we get into like this week where 6 teams are on byes. I mean, it's kind of dire at the tight end position. So you could probably do worse than Noah Fant, especially if it looks like they're going to get him more involved. I would like to see his target share be a little bit more. He only had 4 targets last week. I'd like to see him get 6 or 7 targets, which he might, because there's just nobody else. But that I would definitely like to see that. And then finally, Zach Ertz woke up 9 for 103 yards and a touchdown. For whatever reason, that Chicago defense right now is just really, really bad. And the Eagles took advantage of that. And I think with Ertz, he's too talented to be held down for too long. So I think it's just one of those things where you just got to trust the fact that he is what he is. And he's able to get it done. Looking at some other tight ends, Mike Gesicki from the Dolphins, six catches on 6 targets for 95 yards. With Preston Williams going down, which sucks. Preston Williams absolutely was killing the Jets. He was going to have a big second half. But with Preston Williams being out with an ACL tear, Gesicki turns into the number 2 option in the passing game behind Devontae Parker. Again, some weeks that'll mean absolutely nothing, but there will be other weeks with the right matchup that you might be able to use him and have him be fantasy viable. And that's really, you look at like Julian Edelman and Mohamed Sanu both had 10 catches for like 80 yards, which is like vintage Tom Brady. Just throw the ball 8 yards past the line of scrimmage, catch it, fall down. And it works. And it sucks, and most people don't like it, but it works, and good for them for doing it because they're killing people with it, and they've been killing people with it for 20 years. One other guy I think we need to talk about, and going back to running back, is Jalen Samuels, because he had 13 catches, didn't do much on the ground, but, when you're in a PPR league and you get 13 catches and, you do with him what he did, that's definitely noteworthy. And he did this last year. He looks a lot more thin this year. It looks like he lost about 15 pounds. But he kind of did this last year whenever, Connor went out with an injury towards the end of the season. He actually won teams fantasy championships because he was tight end eligible. But, it's just a PPR. That's what he does. He gets receptions, and, he's not going to turn anything into a 40-yard gain, but he's going to get a bunch of catches out of the backfield. He's going to get a first down and keep the chains moving. And, he's probably pretty cheap. If you own him, you probably didn't spend a lot on him. So, enjoy the ride while you can. Looks like James Conner is questionable for this week. So enjoy that while you can. David Johnson looks like he's going to play. He practiced in 4 today. But Kenyon Drake looked excellent the other night on Thursday Night Football. I don't know that I own David Johnson. I'm not excited about it. But, I'm going to roll him out there this week because, honestly, I just don't have a whole lot of other options. I don't trust Geis coming off IR. I don't think Ty Johnson's going to get enough carries to matter. So, for me, I'm definitely starting David Johnson this week as he comes back off that injury. Hopefully Drake doesn't eat too much into his workload. So, and just kind of looking ahead this week at some of the matchups, we get the Chargers and Raiders on Thursday night, 49 game total there. But, you go down through and you look at some of the games this week and like Saints-Falcons is going to be ugly. Look for the Saints big game or pieces. Alvin Kamara is going to go nuts on Sunday. If you play DFS, play Alvin Kamara. Chiefs have a game total of 27. Bucks have a game total of 23. That Bucks-Cardinals game might actually be a sneakily good game. That's just 2 teams like to throw the ball a lot, don't play a ton of defense. That could be a fun game to watch. Colts playing the Dolphins. Looks like they're right now 27 team total. Packers have a 26 team total. 49ers have a 26 team total. So not a bunch of like really super high scoring games. I'm trying to see if there's any at all that are over 50, and it doesn't look. Bucks Cardinals is over 50. And Saints Falcons, although the Saints are given 32.5 points of that. Yep, that's it. So, when you get in these bye weeks, you're missing 6 teams. And obviously probably with your roster, you had to shuffle a little bit. I was picking up like Curtis Samuel and Kalen Ballage of all people. Good Lord, Mark Walton got suspended, so that's what I'm going to do in Week 10, please Kalen Ballage. Those are kind of the guys I'm picking up, and these are some of the things you got to do. And when, like, if you pick up a guy like Ballage, I mean, you're hoping for, a dozen carries. Hopefully he gets 4 catches, and maybe he can just fall down in the end zone and score. I mean, that would be like the perfect situation, but what I'm probably going to get is like 6 carries for 8 yards and a ball that bounces off his helmet on a pass route. It's just going to be bad. But that's what you do in the bye weeks. I'm not the only one that has to deal with it. A lot of people do. My opponent does. So it just is what it is, and we'll make the best of it. So, decent slate of games. Sunday, I think the Browns-Bills game could be fun. I think Lions-Bears could be fun. I think Bucks-Cardinals is going to be fun. No questions asked. Packers-Panthers could be fun, especially if it snows. I want to say the Rams and Steelers would be fun, but the Steelers' offense is just so bad, I just don't see how they're going to keep up. So, kind of an interesting slate of games. I would say the late games on Sunday are probably better than the early games. Why the NFL doesn't divvy those up a little bit more, I'll never understand. I mean, I think the Lions and Bears should be a late kickoff this coming week, which would balance out that schedule just a hair bit more. But, at least they gave us, Rams, Steelers, Vikings, Cowboys, which will be a good one. But obviously that's a Sunday night game, but that'll be a good one. And then Monday night we get to see Russ in prime time going up against the 49ers. So that should be another good game. Most of you are gearing up, probably get down the stretch, for playoffs and things like that. My advice is right now, churn over the backside of your roster. I don't know, if your trade deadline is come and gone. It sounds like it might have, for a lot of you. I know most leagues around this week 9, week 10, week 11 threshold. But churn that backside of your roster. There are going to be a lot of teams right now that are probably, if they're, 0-9 or 1-8 are giving up. Churn the backside of that roster, pick up guys, see if you can swing some trades. Because right now, if it looks like you're going to make the playoffs, you got to start looking like a couple weeks down the road, sadly. So, see what you can do to, add guys that are going to be fantasy relevant instead of just keeping guys on your bench like Sterling Shepard, who looks like he may not play again this year. But other than that, that's pretty much where we are for week 9. We're going to get through these bye weeks coming up. But, in the time being, you just kind of got to make do with what you got. But I think this is going to be a good week of football. And some things are starting to take place or take shape with regards to the playoffs and things like that. And you'll see some teams playing a little bit harder probably because of that. And you'll see some things start to tank even more than they already have. But that's kind of the name of the game, and that's why we do, what we do here, telling you guys, about all this stuff. So, again, if you have any questions or anything, hit me up on Twitter at Jason Kimlowski. DMs are always open. Be happy to answer any questions you have, start, sit stuff, trade questions, whatever you got. Again, congratulations to Josh, episode number 60. And I will be back here next week, recapping week 10, looking to week 11. But on a Wednesday night while I'm watching Maction, just want to tell you guys good luck on week 10, and I hope you all get a win. See ya.
The Josh Kirby on Sports podcast, part of the Mayo Please podcast network, is sponsored by Route 11 Chips. Make sure you grab a bag today inside your local Martin's, Food Lion, and Giant stores. And our new sponsor and fellow sports fans at PM Plus Reserves, providing reserve studies for homeowner and condominium associations in the Washington metropolitan area for the past 30 years. Make sure you check us out on all streaming platforms via the Mayo Please and the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. You can also find the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, along with the Mayo Please on Twitter. Have any questions for the show? Feel free to shoot us an email at kirbyonsports@gmail.com.
All right, we're back. Thank you once again to Jason Kamlowski, as always, for Fantasy Football Files. each and every week on the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. As always, we're part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network, brought to you by Route 11 Chips and PM Plus Reserves. Getting right back into things, we're going to talk a little bit about the Washington Nationals. I cannot speak tonight. They are World Series champions, yes, but business has to get down to business. Steven Strasburg and Ryan Zimmerman opted out of their deals right after the parade, shall I say rather. We know Rendon is already going to be a free agent, but the Nats just won the World Series, and Ryan Zimmerman's at the age where I think they'll just restructure something small for him, and he'll stay a National. But Steven Strasburg, the way he has pitched in this postseason, I'm sort of scared to see if he will leave the Nationals. The Nats just won the World Series. I think Mike Rizzo and upper management need to throw some money at some players to keep their core intact. I really want to see Strasburg stay with the Nationals. I'm doubtful that Rendon will stay with the Nationals, but I would love to see that happen. To be honest, I don't think the Nats can afford it, but since they just won the World Series, they might have gotten some more revenue, so I'm hoping maybe all three will stay. But, baseball, once again, is a business, so it will be very interesting to see. I was very shocked to hear that Steven Strasburg opted out of his deal, and they said on the news after the World Series that he could opt out 3 days after the World Series, which was the day of the parade, and he did just that. He played excellent, so I think the Nationals need to make a push to throw some money at these guys, sign bigger contracts to get these guys on long-term extensions. But Ryan Zimmerman is the only exception. I think if they cannot get a deal done in Washington, Ryan Zimmerman will retire. So that's my small little take on baseball. Once again, the Nats are World Series champions. Heck yeah. They're partying all day, all night, and that parade was pretty fun as well going down Washington. I did not have a chance to go, but I saw it on TV, and I heard it was really fun. So as the postseason progresses, I will be giving more updates on the Nationals and other teams in the Major Baseball League. But for the time being, it's relatively low chatter except for the Washington Nationals. So, last but not least, we will preview Week 10 of the National Football League, starting off with Los Angeles Chargers, a quick turnaround, playing the Oakland Raiders. California matchup there, one to look out for. Detroit and Chicago in a division matchup. Baltimore and Cincinnati, the 1 o'clock Sunday games. Buffalo and Cleveland. Atlanta and New Orleans. How can Atlanta bounce back from 1-7? The Giants and the Jets. The Cardinals and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Kansas City and Tennessee, Miami and Indianapolis, Carolina and Green Bay, the Los Angeles Rams and Pittsburgh, the Sunday Night Football game, Minnesota and Dallas. That's going to be one to watch. And the Monday Night Football game, probably the game of the week, San Francisco 8-0, Seattle 7-2. That is one to watch out for. With bye weeks from the Broncos, Eagles, Jaguars, Patriots, a much-needed Redskins bye week, and the Houston Texans. And that about does it. That is episode 60 of the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. Thanks, as always, to everybody for all your support. I greatly appreciate it, and I greatly appreciate all the birthday wishes as well. Thank you for that. And till next time, Josh Kirby saying so long, and we will catch you on the next episode. But before we do, we're part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network, sponsored by Route 11 Chips, PM Plus Reserves, and you can find us all streaming platforms via the Mayo Please and the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And that's it. Till next time, so long and peace out.